And let's jump in and get started. I'm going to pull up the handout here. All right, so workshop registration with the Dubsado scheduler. Yes, this is actually possible with a few particular settings in place. You can have clients register for a workshop or an event with you, and then actually have a workflow kick off and send them, some additional materials before or after the event. So, as I mentioned, our goal for today is to create a scheduler template that can be shared publicly or embedded on your website. So, this would be a public registration page to facilitate paid registration or free registration, but we'll talk about paid for a workshop or another special event that you're hosting. So, the booking process is going to be entirely automated, and we can even allow for just a specific number of attendees to register, which is pretty cool. As usual with situations with SAM, these are not total beginner webinars. It does assume that you have some knowledge working in Dubsado. So it does help to be familiar with creating scheduler templates in Dubsado. That will help you out here. Lead capture forms and how those work, we are going to be incorporating that as part of this process. And then workflows. So having some comfort with workflows will help you create that workflow to go with your workshop registration. I am going to touch on some tips for creating the workflow to go with a registration scheduler and lead capture form. But this is actually something I went really in depth on in our webinar on using the scheduler for mini sessions. This is actually a pretty similar approach. We're just changing how the scheduler template is structured. So I've linked for you here, actually right to the exact time when I start talking about workflows with the scheduler in that webinar. So definitely check that out for some more information. We also have our little supply list here. So of course, creating any flow in Dubsado of, chaining together different pieces, it helps to have those pieces created ahead of time, but we'll be walking through the steps here. So we're gonna need a scheduler template for the workshop, a canned email for both the confirmation of registration and any reminder emails you want to send ahead of the event. And then we're also going to need a lead capture form to connect to the scheduler. That's going to be very important to make sure that we're bringing those registrants into Dubsado the correct way and capturing their information so that we can communicate with them further. And finally, before I jump into the actual setup, I just want to cover, sort of what I mean by, what is a workshop or event that would be suitable for implementing with the Dubsado scheduler. So we have some pointers here. So if you're holding a single workshop or event, maybe you are a parenting coach and you want to have just a workshop for families to come and learn some methods for working with their kids. That would be a single workshop that they're registering for and coming to attend. Maybe you are a photographer and you actually host some DIY photography workshops. If each workshop is kind of self-contained and can be booked on its own, that would be a good fit for something like this. So it works really well for an event that you're holding in a physical location that you need people to sign up and pay for ahead of time. So this is different from the mini sessions in the sense that a mini session, each individual client is booking a specific time on your calendar, whereas this, we're going to have multiple people booking the same time slot on the calendar, all to attend the same event. So it works really great for workshops with a limited number of available spaces. Could be unlimited as well, but we do have the tools in place to limit the registration. This is going to be for public workshop registration. So we are incorporating the lead capture form. This is going to be something you can embed on your website or share as a direct link with your followers on social media. This is not going to be something that you can send to existing clients or an existing client could sign up for your workshop, but you wouldn't be sending this through a project in Dubsado. And we will get into that a little bit more and why that is in the scheduler settings portion here. And finally, this will work for either free or paid registrations. I will go through, adding payment because most events like this you would be charging for. This type of setup would not be suitable in a couple of circumstances. So number one, if you want to have your clients register for an entire workshop series up front all at one time, that is not going to be possible with the scheduler. So these workshops, they'll need to be booked kind of one at a time. Certainly you can have more than one scheduler if you have more than one workshop going on. That is totally fine. That works. But the clients will only be able to book one workshop at a time, book and pay for one workshop at a time. So keep that in mind. Recurring events are also not going to be possible with the scheduler. So this is best for those one-off ones. Again, you could be holding the same workshop once a month and have a scheduler set up to do that. It's just that clients aren't going to be able to sign up once and attend every single month and have that show up on the calendar. So keep that in mind. Along with that, and I didn't include it here, but we're going to be talking about registrations being paid in full up front. You're going to run into a number of issues, trying to kind of get things to work right with a payment schedule in this case with this setup. So I would recommend doing that payment in full upfront for the registration fee. And finally, if you have a really complex class or event schedule with many locations and many instructors and lots of different times of classes during the day, that's probably going to be handled better through a dedicated platform prepared for that type of scheduling. But you certainly do not need to go to that if the types of events you're holding will work within these pointers here. So I think this should work for the majority of businesses who would just be holding a workshop or event that they want clients to register for. Okay, so how do we set this up? We are going to start by creating the scheduler template. And even before that, something that might help you out is just writing out the details of the workshop. Here at Dubsado, we're really big fans of kind of planning out ahead of time before you start creating in the system. It'll help keep you on track. So, just creating, a sheet with, the name of the event, the time, location, the price, all of that good stuff. That way you have something to refer to what you've decided on while you set up the template. That will be, very helpful to you. All right, so what is it like setting up this template here? Jumping over into Dubsado, we're going to set up a new scheduler template. So we're under templates and scheduler, and up here at the top, I'm going to click add template, and we're going to create a new one here. So I'm going to host a photography workshop. And the first step, of course, is to name the workshop here, and this will be visible to those signing up. This will be at the top of the registration page. And we also want to set the duration for the workshop. So when we click this drop down, we have a couple of preset options. You may really find that you need to do a custom amount of time for this. Workshops might be a little bit longer. You can set that in minutes or hours. Note that the maximum is 12 hours. So that's the longest an event can span. I'm going to say this is going to be 4 hours long. Now we get into the point where we're setting the availability. So if you've set availability in the scheduler in the past, you might be more used to setting this up for multiple time slots on multiple days. We are going to take a different approach here because this is a single workshop. So for when can this appointment be scheduled? I'm going to select a fixed date range. So this would be our approach if we have just a single workshop. So I can also go through an example of if you have maybe say a photography workshop every other Friday or something like that, how you'd go about it. But just to start off with, let's look at a one-time, just one-off workshop or event. So we've chosen that fixed date range. Next, we're going to set the start and end date to the same date, and then we're going to use the date of the workshop. And this will go better if we set the end date first, assuming it's in the future. So let's say my workshop is going to be on Saturday, January 18th. And we want to set the start date to that as well. Great. So now we have that one date open. And we need to set in our time frame there on the day. So I'm going to click into that date and we're going to add our time slot. So I want to add a 4-hour time slot, and this would just be the start and end time of your workshop. So we would do, let's say it starts at noon and it goes until 4 p.m. And once I enter those, I'll click Add Times. And finally, we have to apply the time slot to the date. So I could say only January 18th or all Saturdays. If it's truly a one-off event, it would be fine to say only on this particular date. And there we go. We have that date and time saved there. So this will be the only date and only time slot available on our entire scheduler when it gets opened up. Now, the next part is very important, and this is how we get the scheduler to work like a event registration where more than one person can sign up for this workshop. Where it says once booked, show me as, we want to choose available instead of busy. So we want to choose available here. The reason for this is that this setting controls essentially whether a slot on the scheduler can be double booked. So when we're setting up the scheduler template, if we choose busy, that means anytime someone books a particular slot on this scheduler, I want it to be taken off and marked as unavailable for anyone else who is scheduling in the future. That's not what we want to happen because we want more than one person to attend our event. So with that, we will mark this as available. Next, you'll want to put in the location of the event. This is very useful because we do have an appointment location smart field that you can actually add into your reminder and confirmation emails that are sent out through the scheduler. So this is a great way to get the address in here and have that autofill into the email that's going out. As I mentioned before, this is going to be a workshop registration scheduler that is meant to be shared publicly. So we're using the public sharing link or the embed code for this scheduler. It's not intended to be sent through a project to someone already in Dubsado. So this email down at the bottom of our first settings page, this email is actually the invitation email. If we were sending this registration scheduler through a workflow or directly through a project, this is the email that would be used. We're not doing that because clients will be accessing this from a public page. So we can just leave this as is. The clients will never see it. We don't need to make any changes there. I'm going to go ahead and click Save to save what we've done so far. And we have our workshop scheduler created here. So now that we have the basics down of the date and the time, and we have our available setting there, we're going to go into the Advanced tab of the scheduler to refine this a bit further. So under the Advanced Appointment Settings, this will help us control how late people can register and how many folks can register for this event. So the first setting here is prevention. So we want to make sure that no one is registering an hour before the event and then just showing up, right? So we want to make sure that registration is going to automatically close down at a certain amount of time before the event takes place. And that is calculated in hours. So, if you need to extend this time, really have, I don't know, something like a week or something, you're just going to have to multiply out the number of hours that would be for that number of days. We can say 48 hours here, in the example where I just need at least 2 days advance notice. And 48 hours prior to the workshop, no one will be able to schedule or register any longer. The buffer time, we don't really need to worry about in this type of scheduler template because we don't have multiple appointments being booked in one day. So we can more or less leave this as is. The increments are important. We actually want to set this equal to the number of minutes in duration that the workshop is. Because what we don't want to happen is for someone to open this up and see different start times of the event. So, we would want to set this accordingly. And this should also really work in tandem with, on the basic settings, the appointment duration. This should also really prevent that increment from getting out of whack as well. So let's leave it at 30 minutes for now. And if when we preview it, we're seeing a problem, we can adjust this. But because we've left the slot as just a 4-hour slot and the event duration is 4 hours, that should fill in okay. But this is a setting you can adjust if that's not quite working for you. Finally, under appointment details, this is where we will determine how many people we'd like to be able to register for the event. So we can do this in one of two ways. We have the first option here, allow a maximum number of appointments per day. And we also have something that allows us to set kind of a maximum number of uses for this scheduler overall. So you could set this if you don't intend on using the scheduler again. If you intend on kind of using this from time to time and just resetting the date available, you might want to stick to the maximum number of appointments per day. That'll keep it more flexible. This will also work if you want to offer in the same scheduler, maybe you just have a photography workshop every single Friday, right? So we could say, let's say the maximum number of attendees, you can take 6 people at a time. So if we do maximum 6 appointments per day, that means the scheduler will lock off a date once 6 people have scheduled that time. So that'll work whether we have just one date available or more than one date available. What this won't work well with is if you have a morning session and an afternoon session. In that case, we want to have 2 entirely separate schedulers so that we can say, 6 for the morning and 6 for the afternoon. This is just going to be the maximum for the full day. So if you put in a morning session and an afternoon session on the same scheduler template, it wouldn't be able to tell whether 6 people had signed up for the morning or the afternoon. It just wouldn't be distributed correctly there. So we'll set our maximum number of essentially attendees by setting the maximum number of appointments per day. And the reason why we have to share the scheduler publicly in this use case all comes down to this setting. And this is because when you set a maximum number of appointments on a scheduler template, when that scheduler template is shared publicly, the maximum applies to the scheduler as a whole. Everyone visiting the scheduler and making appointments is subject to this maximum. But when you send this scheduler template through a project directly, any scheduler template through a project, the maximums here are only going to apply on that project. It's not working across all instances of the scheduler that you've applied to multiple projects. So you could prevent the same client from booking 6 appointments in one day, but it's not going to apply to all of your clients. So that's why with a workshop registration, event registration, this is something that has to go through that public sharing link or embed code and not through a project to start with. So we have our maximum there. So those are pretty much the settings for getting the availability into the scheduler. So let's take a look at what our scheduler looks like so far. I'm going to click on that link icon and pull up the direct link to the scheduler so we can take a look at our calendar here. Awesome. So we have just our one date showing up, Saturday the 18th, with just our one start time of noon. So that would be, the only date available to select for the client. Great. So that is looking as we expect. So what is the next step here? We've set all of our scheduler settings appropriately. And what I like to do next is go out and just make sure I have all of the other templates that I need to connect into the scheduler. So let's take a look at canned emails for a confirmation and a reminder, what you can do with that. So heading over to canned emails, let me just double check just one more time and make sure I've saved the scheduler. Don't forget to save as you make changes. Under templates and canned emails, I have a couple workshop emails prepared here, so we can have a reminder and a confirmation. The confirmation email is always going to send automatically anytime someone completes their booking. So we do want to customize that. And within here, don't forget that you can use the appointment smart fields. So we can put appointment smart fields in any email that we are intending to connect directly to the scheduler. So that's going to be appointment confirmation and appointment reminder type of emails. We can use these appointment smart fields. And you can see I have one here for the appointment location. Again, you can find those under smart field, appointment, and then all of your options are right here to fill in the information. So I have a very similar email setup for the 24-hour reminder. It pretty much includes the same information. As you're setting this up, you can create certainly more than one reminder. You can send out multiple reminders leading up to the event. And somewhere in there, you might want to include some directions on where to go, where to find you, what to bring, things like that. You can really personalize in those emails. And the next piece, looking at our outline, we have our confirmation and our reminder. I want to make sure we have our lead capture form. So because this is a scheduler that we'll be sharing publicly, we must include a lead capture form. If we don't, each time someone books and they pay an invoice, that invoice is going to kind of be floating out in space and it won't be connected to their project. So it will be really tough to find later on. So we want to make sure we're using a lead capture as part of the scheduler to collect the client's information. This is also what will make it possible to start off a workflow as well based on the registration. So the lead capture is going to be very important. If you miss that, we're just under templates and forms, and I opened a lead capture template that I've already started. On any lead capture form, you are required to have 3 short answer fields for the first name, last name, and email. Make sure, again, that they are marked as required and mapped to the client first name, last name, and email respectively. That's the bare minimum that you need, but you can always add in some more questions. If you need to know anything up front while someone is registering, great time to ask that here on the form. So get that lead capture form set up as well. Okay, now we're going to connect everything up to the scheduler template itself. So back in the scheduler, we have our photography workshop scheduler we've been working on in the advanced tab. We'll scroll down and let's set our confirmation email. So if we don't set a confirmation email, Dubsado does have a default email that it will send, but of course we want to be custom to our event here. So let's make sure we pull that up. So we'll choose our registration confirmation there. The additional form is going to be the lead capture form. So that's going to make it so that when the client opens this up, they will see the scheduler first, verify the date and time of the workshop, and then go on to the lead capture form and fill out that information. So we'll have our, let's see, where was it? Here it is, our workshop registration lead capture. So that's all connected. We have our notification setting here to get those reminder emails going out. So we'll toggle that on and then set up our first reminder. So I'll put 24 hours. This is how far in advance of the appointment you want the reminder to send. And we will choose our 24-hour reminder and click add. If you want to add more than one reminder, you can absolutely do so. Just write some more canned emails. And you can see here, we still have the option to add another. So you could put in, another number of hours. Maybe you want to remind a little sooner with some more information, 72 hours before. Select your email, click add. You can add, whichever reminders you need to go out. I personally love turning on the monthly view. I think it gives the clients some better context in terms of where the workshop is falling on the calendar. So I like to turn that on. And finally, because this is a paid event, let's turn on the option for an invoice. So we'll toggle that on. And this is going to require a certain amount to be paid by the client signing up in order to secure the booking. So the client could go through selecting the date and time, filling out the lead capture form. That's going to generate a project, and then they'll get to the invoice. If they don't pay the invoice then and there, that is, going to prevent the appointment from being made on their behalf. So additional spots will still be open at that time if they don't make the payment. To do this, we'll click New Line Item. And we'll just put in registration fee 1, and we'll put in a price there. And you could add a category and tax if needed as well. Click Add Item, and in this case, $600 would be required to be paid in full upfront in order to go through with the registration. If you do need to break this up, I recommend checking out my webinar on let's see, the scheduler proposal flow. I think I cover a little bit in there on using a proposal instead of a lead capture, so you can get the payment schedule in there, but we're not going to go over it today, but that might give you some ideas if that's necessary. All right, I think we have all of our bits and pieces in place. We have our availability set, all our emails connected, our form connected. So at the bottom, I'll click Save. And then let's take another look here at the scheduler. So I'm just going to copy that direct link again. This is how you can preview the scheduler. Okay, great. So here's that monthly view working for us. So we can, click on the workshop time, submit and next. Then we can fill out the lead capture form here. This is going to be a required piece of registering for the event. Submit that. And when I click submit on the lead capture, that is generating the project in Dubsado. So the nice thing about that is you can, potentially see who has, started to register for the workshop, but not quite completed the registration. If that happens and you want to invite them, to try to do that again, my recommendation is to email the client through Dubsado, send them a link back to the public scheduler page. So they have to restart the registration. They can't continue from where they were before or pay their existing invoice. They need to restart from the beginning in order to book that appointment. But you can send them that link through Dubsado and then just archive or delete the project to clear them out. If you want to, if someone's been sitting there a few days and didn't complete the registration and you want to try to get them booked in. All right, when I click submit and next, that project's getting generated. We come to the invoice. So this is the exact process your client will follow as they register for your event. Here at the end, there's the registration fee. When they click submit and finish, they'll be asked to pay. So this is something where you will be required to have a payment processor connected to your Dubsado account. If you don't, I'm afraid your clients will not have a way to pay the invoice and secure the booking. So you do want to have at least one payment processor connected and turned on by default in your settings for the account. So there you have it. That is the basics. Those are the basics of setting up the scheduler for workshop registration. I mentioned I would go through a couple other availability settings here. So let's say we wanted to do it just every Saturday. What you could do is instead of a fixed date range, you could change this to maybe a rolling day window. And say you want to have that be maybe 30 days. And then what you would need to do is adjust the availability so that only the workshop days are open. So we could go back into our Saturday one, apply that to all Saturdays. And then for each other day of the week, you'd have to click in, remove the time slot there, and apply to all of that type of day. So you can just you only have to do it once for each day of the week. Just click on the little X and apply it to all types of those days, clearing out the time slots. There we go. So that would make it so that this, workshop you're holding every single Saturday. But again, clients would only, book one at a time. They could come back and book another one, but they would just book them one at a time. If it's something more where you want to do, every other Saturday or every third Thursday of the month, you'll have to manage that a little more carefully. In that case, I would recommend setting a fixed date range again, but maybe starting, whenever you want to start, and then set an end date out as far as you want to, manage. And then once you've set those days, you'd have to go in individually using the preview calendar here. Let's say we don't want a workshop on the 11th. We would take out the slot, apply to only January 11th. And then we can use the arrow right here to fast forward. Let's say there's no workshop on the 25th. So we can take that slot out, apply only to January 25th. And then once we save this, and preview it again from the link, we'll notice that just those two dates are open on the scheduler, the 18th and the 1st. So this is something, if it's a little bit more customized repeat pattern, you'll have to keep manage of that a little more manually. And then, as times open up again, you'll just have to come in and readjust the fixed date range and remove dates as necessary. But you can absolutely manage that, if you have kind of a recurring workshop schedule that you want to keep open, maybe on your website or, available to your followers. So those are some availability ideas there. Let's double check with our outline here, what else we have to go over. Right, so let's talk about grouping workshops together. So maybe you offer a lot of different workshops, or you do morning and afternoon sessions, and you might have to have multiple schedulers at the same time that all apply to your workshops. So with that, you could certainly embed them each separately on your website. That's no problem. But you might want to provide a little bit more streamlined way for clients to find the workshops that are available. And we can accomplish that with a scheduler group. So I also have a couple of other example workshop templates here for some other workshops. And let's say I just want one page on my site where you can view any workshops that are available. All you need to do is go to the Scheduler Groups tab after creating the individual scheduler templates for each of your workshops. And we'll click Add Group. And this is going to allow us to group the schedulers together and kind of make a landing page of sorts to put on your website or share. We'll just call it workshops, and we can choose which schedulers to add. So I'll just choose those there. Again, we don't need an invite email at the bottom because this only applies, this method is only applying to publicly shared schedulers. So we don't need to edit this here. I'll click Create. Awesome. And now we have this scheduler template, and what you can do at any time is use this drop down to see what workshops are included. You can click the settings button here and edit this group. And maybe a workshop is old or no longer offered, you could take that out of the group and save it, and it will all update automatically at the sharing link. So when you click share on a scheduler group, you get an embed code and a direct link, just as you do with a single scheduler. So it's the same process of sharing. But when I open this up, what the client will see is this landing page where they can first choose the workshop they want to take. So you could have your morning sessions and your PM sessions, and maybe your one-off workshop here. So it's just a great way to kind of organize that for your client, make it a one easy place for everyone to book those events with you. Finally, as promised, I'll touch on a couple of strategies for workflows. Again, this is more covered directly in my mini scheduler or mini sessions scheduler webinar, which I've linked in the handout, and you can find it on YouTube or in our Facebook group as well. But if we go under templates and workflow, I have two examples or two workflows set up here. One would be meant to be connected to your lead capture form. So that would kick off as soon as the client submits the lead capture form. And as we talked about with the mini sessions, unfortunately, it's not possible to include a contract as part of that sign-up process with the scheduler. It's also not possible to send a form through the confirmation or reminder emails. So if you need to send a contract, if you need to send another type of form to your clients prior to the workshop, having the workflow set up is a helpful way to do that. So with this workflow here, we have a send form action to send out a questionnaire as soon as folks register for the workshop. But very importantly, we have triggered this action 3 hours after invoice paid in full. And the delay time is up to you and how you want that to work. But the main thing here is that we're triggering this action off of the invoice being paid. This is important, again, because the workflow would be starting as soon as the lead capture is submitted and before the invoice has actually been paid by the client. So we want to make sure that even though the workflow is sitting there active on the project, it doesn't actually send anything out until the client makes their payment. So that will prevent that. Finally, you might want to have some automated follow-ups ready for after the workshop is over. And we can do that with a workflow as well. With workshops in particular, and this will work best for those one-off workshops when you only offer one date and time on a scheduler with a particular lead capture form. This method will not work very well with the scheduler we just set up, where we have workshops on a repeating basis throughout the month. The reason for that is when an appointment is scheduled, That's setting an appointment date and time. That's not going to be accessible to the workflow. It's also not setting a project date. So the workaround to that is to actually set a fixed date around the actual date of the event. So this, again, works for those one-off events that you're holding. So when you set up a workflow to maybe send a thank you email after the workshop is over, we can edit this and choose a fixed date of when we want this to send. If our workshop is going to be on the 18th, maybe I want it to go out the 20th at 9 a.m. So you can see how this would not be effective if you have multiple dates offered in the same scheduler. You might have to find a different way to approach that. But this will work for those one-off events. And with this as well, anytime we have a fixed date in a trigger for an action, this action will run on this date regardless of whether or not the client has actually paid their invoice and completed their registration. So the trick for that is in the workflow, that's why we would split this up into two separate workflows so that the workflow being applied by the lead capture form doesn't have any fixed date triggers in it. We're only working off of the invoice being paid in full. And then we have a separate workflow where we have that fixed date trigger. And the bridge between the two is a start a workflow action in the first workflow that is triggered by the invoice being paid in full. So if you have no form to send, but you want to send out that thank you email, you might actually just have a workflow connected to your lead capture that just says start a workflow after invoice paid in full, just to prevent anything from going out prematurely to clients who don't end up registering, completing their payment. So that's the trick there. And you'll also find that illustrated at the bottom of your handout. But definitely check out the other webinar as well for a more in-depth walkthrough on setting up the workflow to work in tandem with the scheduler. But with workshops, I think most of what you're sending out is going to revolve around reminders leading up to the workshop. You may be able to get away with just setting those up in the reminder emails with the scheduler. You may not need a workflow at all. This would just be taking it to another level if you have more content you want to send. Okay, that is it. That is everything on the outline for today. Pretty much everything to know about setting up these kind of workshop scheduler templates. Kind of fun, to have these events. Hopefully in your business, you have some opportunities to do that and work with folks face to face.